Thank you all for coming and looking at the art. I don't have prepared a speech or anything. I'm hoping to just answer questions. And if you want to aim me in a particular direction, please.
Okay, so for instance, that one over there, how long did it take you to do that?
The sud? 2 or 3 months of research and 3 or 4 months of work.
And how did you pick what you depicted there?
For the whole series or that one particular?
Well, for the whole series, like what was your...
Okay, so the river series, I'm kind of a water baby. My parents threw me in the water before I could sit up and just would pull me out by the hair now and then. So I sort of identify with water creatures, and I used to work in the really easily acquired paper sizes, 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17, and then I realized that if I wanted to be taken more seriously in the art world, I probably needed to work bigger because there's sort of a prejudice against small work and against women's work and all that kind of stuff. So then it took me quite a long time to find large-scale paper that had good colors, and I got a grant, thank goodness, and then I was able to order paper. At this point, I'm going to make an admission. The largest pieces are all G. Clay's of original paper cuts. The reason I don't have the original paper cuts of these ones is because the paper that I got, even though it cuts really nicely and the colors are really nice, it turns out that the different colors absorb moisture from the air at different rates. So then it buckles, and if we had the originals up, I'd be having a nervous breakdown right now. So back to why I decided to do rivers, because I'm kind of a water baby and I've been an environmentalist my whole life, and I thought, oh, it'd be fun to do a series of river organisms, native ones and invasive ones, and just really delve into it, because I've been doing paper cuts for so long that kind of the way that I learn about the world is I do a paper cut about whatever it is I'm interested in. So I tend to do series, so I learn more. So I decided, well, I should start with the Mississippi because I wanted to do major rivers that had a huge impact in the country they're in, or countries they're in. And then I was thinking about what other ones to do, and I thought, well, the Nile, obviously, and then what other big ones are there? The Ganges, which is, such an integral part of India. And then I thought, well, the Mekong, obviously, and we've been to the Mekong. We were there for a business trip. I do worm composting. We were there on a worm composting junket. So we saw the Mekong, which was amazing. And then we've been to the Yangtze because our daughter lived in China. So I came up with those, and then I realized, oh, those are all really heavily colonized or invaded, and most of the environmental problems have to do with that colonization. So I gradually came to that realization, and so it's become sort of a dual thread of the indigenous creatures and why they're in that plight, and how colonization interfaces with those things.
It's interesting.
Would you talk a little bit about paper cuts as a medium?
Me in particular, or paper cuts in general?
Yeah, either way.
Paper cuts in general were invented in China, kind of where paper was invented. And in China, you've probably all seen those red paper cuts. They're just, and they paste them up for holidays. They put them on windows, they put them on door sills and stuff like that. And then from China, it's sort of spread to Europe and other parts of Asia. And how did I come to paper cutting?
Yes, that's what we want to know. Good, I didn't miss it.
No, you did not miss it. Well, when I went to college, I thought I was going to be an environmental biologist, and it turned out that I did not realize how much artwork I did. And so when I started hallucinating in chemistry class with no chemical input whatsoever, I thought, okay, I need to switch majors because I'm having withdrawals. So I switched to art major. So I have an art degree, which is, might as well have majored in dumpster diving. But organic landscaping for many years, and then we had our first kid, and I realized that having an infant and doing watercolors were not compatible because the baby yells. How many of you do watercolors? Nobody? Yes. Okay, the drawing line, right? You're doing a watercolor, the baby yells, you go tend to the baby, you come back, and you've got a drawing line you cannot get rid of, right? So I thought, okay, this is not working. I need to come up with something that does not have a drying time. And then I don't remember if it was in a book or that I saw some paper cuts and I just really liked the look of them. So I thought, oh, I will try paper cutting because nothing to dry, it's cheap, right? Scissors, paper. So for a year, every single paper cut I worked on fell apart because I made that fatal cut and the whole thing's gone. So finally, after a year, I managed to have a paper cut that didn't fall apart. And then I started sending samples to publishers, and Dover Publications hired me to do eventually 11 books of graphics and, you know, like clip art and stickers and stencils. So they basically paid me to learn how to do paper cuts, which was great. Have I answered your question?
Yes.
Adequately? Okay, cool.
Well, we all grew up on making the snowflake, so I suppose that's the beginning.
And you know what? I'm terrible at that kind of snowflake because you have to fold it really accurately. I cannot fold a piece of paper in half to save my life. When I do paper cuts, when I do snowflakes, I do a lot of them that are like animals and plants and stuff, and I just do a pattern and I lay it out. I don't fold it because it would end up a mess if I tried doing it the way you can do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it that way.
Could you talk a little bit about your process, not only just creatively, but also just logistically?
Logistically, sure. Okay, I did single color paper cuts for 25 years and would try figuring out how to do or add in colors that whole time. And I tried various things like, you know, stick on little bitty bits of paper for the colors, and that did not work well because I'm really sloppy and I would end up, you know, with it glued to my fingers and in my hair and stuff. So, and by the way, my husband does the gluing. I do not do the gluing.
Good man.
Although the big ones, it's a two-person job because it takes two people to lower it down, because otherwise it would be a disaster. Okay, so for these paper cuts, because there's so much time invested in each sheet, I actually make a pattern of each organism, so I work out all the mistakes on the pattern, and so all the mistakes have like a lot of tape on them. And then when I figure that out, then I lay them out on the sheet that I'm going to have as the top, and then I, you know, cut them out. Oh, and I sketch by hand. I'm not like using a computer or anything. So then I lay them out and I do the first layer, and before I choose what colors I'm going to use, I make a list of all the organisms I've chosen to do, and I usually choose them based on, you know, either their role in the environment or whether I think they're adorable or, you know, that kind of thing, and how well I think I can do depicting that particular organism. So anyway, I get it laid out, and I have made a list of all the organisms and what colors the organisms are, and then I have to sort of figure out, okay, what colors need to be on top of each other in order for me to get the effects I need to get, which can be really complicated to figure out. And sometimes things change a little bit here and there, like sometimes Walt will be gluing and he'll come upstairs and say, do you really think this green sheet is adding to this paper cut? And can you come and look at it? And I look at it and I'm like, there it goes. So, you know, there goes a month's worth of work or whatever. Because the top layer is much more complicated than the lower layers. Every single color you see is attached to that color sheet of paper. So it's whole sheets of paper layered on themselves. So the really complicated top layer is the one I try really hard not to mess up. And you know, there have been paper cuts where there's a lower layer that I've had to redo a couple of times because I've made a mistake. Luckily, I've managed to mostly avoid making mistakes on the top sheet because that would really make me swear.
What's your favorite swear word?
So sometimes I wake up at like 3 in the morning and go, oh, the green has to go on top of the blue, not below the blue, because otherwise this won't work. And then I wake up 2 hours later and go, the purple has to be below the red. And then I wake up and then I go, no, that's all wrong. After you But I try really hard to learn something new with each paper cut, not just about the environmental issues and that kind of thing, but also a new way of doing something, a new technique. So I try really hard to push myself with each one.
So how many, that's a lot of work.
Yes, it is. And the really unfun part is the writing. Like, really unfun. I actually have one more Nile piece that's almost done, and I had to pull back and say, I don't have time to finish this. If I try rushing, I'm gonna make a fatal cut, and then I'm gonna be really upset. So the writing was done instead of finishing up that one, which is at home waiting for me to look at it and figure out what I need to edit to make it look the way I want it to look. And then, well, comes and he looks at it and he says, do you really think? He's really, really good at constructive criticism. I didn't understand how important constructive criticism was and how valuable it was, even after getting an art degree, until we started dating, and he would look at something I'd done and he'd say, I think it needs a little more work, and I'd get all upset and cranky, and what do you mean? And it gradually dawned on me that not only was he only doing this because he loved me, but he was right. So he made my work so much better, actually. And I have gotten to the point where I won't even give people constructive criticism unless I'm absolutely positive, A, they really want it, and B, they can take it. Because sometimes somebody will say, can you, give me your opinion about this? And if I give them an honest opinion, they never forgive me. So it's like,
I've learned how to be a little more modest in my criticism.
I want you to keep going. It's important.
That's really sweet.
I'm curious, so then with each piece, like how many layers on average are you working with? And like what's your least, what's the most layers?
Yeah. I think my least for these bigger ones is like 7 sheets and the most is 14.
Okay, which one has 14? I was gonna say is.
Yeah. Sometimes I do the same color more than once because it's absolutely impossible to, especially with eyes. If I try cutting so that the eye is black close to the top, it can look kind of dead. So sometimes I add black way down below as well. And sometimes, there's a sheet that has like 3 little holes in it.
What kind of tools do you use? X-Acto knives, scissors, rulers?
I use scissors. If I used an X-Acto blade, there'd be a lot more blood on these.
Very, very small scissors.
Very small scissors. My favorite scissors are actually manicure scissors made either in Italy or Germany. They work the best. How many have I worn out by now? Like 10?
She wears out the joint, basically. The little screw
Yeah.
gets worn, so worn that they start.
They get wobbly. I tried using X-Acto blades when I first started and quickly went, no. I tried again about a year ago on one of these big ones, and I dulled the blade in like 10 minutes. So these would take like 1,000 blades, right? So scissors are the way to go. And when I get blood on stuff, it's only very rarely that I've stabbed myself. Usually I've like rubbed a knuckle raw on the paper, and I finally got smart, and I'm starting to wear little cotton gloves with the fingers I cut out. Because then when I'm like going across the page, because that one has blood on the back side of the original. And there's another one in here, I can't remember which one it is, there's blood on that one too. That's when I decided I need to start using gloves. Anybody?
Have you worked in collage much? Related?
Not too much. I have done a little bit. I mean, almost everybody has, right? But because I'm not really good with glue, for the same reason I'm not really good with charcoal, collage is really not the way for me to go. It ends up in the wrong places, stuck to me.
You mentioned when you started talking a word that I just didn't know how to pronounce. You said G-clay.
Mm-hmm.
What is
G-clay?
that, and where does it come from?
Okay,
Is it only that terminology? Is it always used just in the context of a particular way of making art, or what does it mean?
okay, so these big pieces are G-clay prints that are made from scans of the original paper cuts.
Okay.
Because the originals, like I said, I'd be having a nervous breakdown because they'd be bubbling
Yeah.
and warping.
So what does G-clay mean?
G-clay is just the name of the print. It may be the name of the machine. Avery, do you know?
I think it's the process of like the archival ink they use.
Yeah, it's archival ink, and it's on, usually like on watercolor paper, so it's all very stable. It's not likely to like fade, but these prints are extremely accurate. And I had kind of a funny thing. I was getting ready to get some work to Avery's gallery, and it was like a one-color paper cut, and I was like, is this a print or is this the original? And I spent like 2 hours trying to figure it out because it was framed. I finally did find the original, but I had been looking at a print. So these things are super accurate, and they do an incredibly good job. It's CPL Imaging in Duluth, which is owned by ACO.
Thank you.
So for your whole process, for what you're doing today in your work, when you look at one of your pieces, what is it that just lights you up and fills you with delight? What is joyful to you? Is it a particular color, or I'm just interested in?
I think I like learning about the organisms, and when I'm working on these pieces, it's sort of like meditating on each organism. And that's kind of how I learn about the world, I guess, at this point. And what fills me with delight, well, usually at least a 6-month hiatus with not looking at it. Because you know how it is, you get to the point where you can't even see it, and I'm just like, I can't even look at this, I have no idea, I'm gonna think it's terrible if I keep looking at it, I need to not. So I tend to like the older ones better because it's been longer since I was looking at it. But you know the feeling, you can't even see it anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Maybe this question was already asked, but do you have any, you keep track of how long it takes you to create one?
I'm trying to get better about that. The latest one, normally I don't. The latest one that is not here because I decided I better stop before I wrecked it. Sorry if I'm getting loud and soft, I'm not good at this. I actually put the start date, I wrote it down on the back, so getting smart in my old age. Anybody else?
This one here is sort of an outlier compared to the rest of them. Could you comment on that one?
Yeah, it's me being smart alecky and depressed. it's mandala for the end of the world is the creatures that might survive.
Oh, okay.
You can't read about this constantly without getting angry. Which is why, actually, while I'm working, I have Chinese TV going all day. Because it's very communal and it's very loving. And when we were in China, I could not help noticing how incredibly sweet people were to each other. Very different from the United States. So anyway, especially like during COVID, oh my God, I wanted to be in China. Not here. Anyway, so, and Leah Yellowbird, who's one of Avery's other artists, she watches British TV all day long while she's working too. It's a thing. Anybody else?
Well, I think they're great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
The detail on your snake is just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
The
you tell I like snakes?
Not everybody. They appear in different places.